YouTube, but it's actually an unlisted video, so it won't be going live on YouTube. It's just for replay purposes that it's there. Okay, so welcome. So good to have you joining me live. And as I said, these sessions we've put on as a special sessions just to give you that kickstart if you are looking at divorce proceedings. Over the next 4 days, I'm going to be sharing information about the process of divorce and the different things that you need to think about as you're starting this journey, or even if you've already started. So each day I'm going to go through information and give you some action to take as well. So we have got a workbook with some mini actions, and each day's actions are in this workbook. I'll ask Nelma just to put it in the chat box for you so you can see the workbook if you haven't already seen it by email. I know there was an issue with one of the emails that attached the workbook, you couldn't download it. So hopefully you'll see it in the chat box, and you'll be able to download it from there. So keep a copy of that. You'll be using it over the 4 days. And there's only small actions for you to take, just so that you don't just go away, you've listened in for 4 days, but you've actually taken some steps to move things forward, because I'm all about moving you forward with the different things that you need to do around this time. So I hope you manage to get a copy of that and keep it to hand during these 4 days. So the way it will work during these sessions is I will talk for 20 to 30 minutes, hopefully. Some of the subjects are quite involved, so I do talk a bit longer for those ones. And at the end of the session, I will take questions from you. So feel free to put your questions in the chat box. You can put them in so that everyone can see your questions, or you can put them directly to me, so as a private message, if you don't want to share your questions. And I won't share your name as well when I'm answering your questions, if you are worried about obviously being anonymous. We should be finishing in around 45 minutes. So you can obviously then continue with the rest of your day. But it is good to be here live, because actually you get so much from attending live. You can then ask your questions as well, and I'll try to get to as many questions as I can. There will be a replay going out. So if you want to cover some of the information I've shared again, then feel free to obviously watch the replay. The workbook and any actions will be there as well on the replay. So let me start sharing my screen, because obviously I want to get to giving you as much information as I can during these sessions, because it's all about sharing and empowering you as much as possible. So let me know if you can see that okay. I hope you can. Feel free to let me know in the chat box if you can see the slides okay. And I'll keep the chat box open as well, so I can keep an eye on what you are saying. Okay. Yes, so I'm having a look at the chat box. Welcome. Thank you for saying hi in the chat. Is this meeting available to listen to later? Yes. Thank you, Nelma, for saying that. You can't join all 4 sessions. Log in when you can. Perfect. You can see it. That's great. And I hope you can hear me okay as well. So thank you for joining today. Let's move on to the first slide. Who am I? So some of you will have come across me, and you'll know who I am. You know what I do. But for those of you that haven't come across me before, my name is Bhavna Radia. I am a qualified family lawyer. I qualified in my 20s, and family law is what I've done ever since then. At that time, I worked for a solicitor's practice, and I worked as a traditional lawyer, working on an hourly rate, looking after clients in that way. And that is not what I do now. And I will be sharing a little bit about what I do on day 4. But obviously, feel free to message me if you want to know a little bit more about what I do. Um, I got married in my 20s and it was an arranged marriage at the time. My parents introduced me to somebody who they thought would be a good match. And after a very short period of time, I think we got to know each other for about 8 weeks before we got engaged. So it was very quick and we didn't really know each other. You can't really know somebody that quickly. But we got married and we've got three daughters together. There was lots and lots of difficulties in the marriage, and I won't go through, exactly what they were because, that I like to share my story and my journey rather than the story of what happened in the marriage. But we did have difficulties over the years. And there was many times where I thought, is this going to last? Am I going to, you know, fill that dream which I had, which was marriages are forever. You don't come into a marriage for thinking about this not being forever. I fell into that fairy tale that we all have that, one day I'll get married, I'll have children, and it will be forever. We'll live happily ever after. We had children together, so, it's even harder to think about ending the marriage. And unfortunately, we did get to that point where we got divorced. The children at the time were aged 9, 6, and 1 years old. And so it's even more difficult when you've got really young children and you come to the realization that your marriage isn't working. And if you're at that place, if you've made that decision to get divorced, you know that it's not an easy decision, that this is a really hard step to take. You've probably agonized over this for many, many months, if not years. My marriage continued for 15 years. And even though probably, there was thoughts of, I was worrying about how things were going, probably in year 2, I'd started to see things that weren't quite right, starting to worry about things. It took me 15 years to get to that point where I said that was it. Maybe the time is now that we need to take this step. So it took me many, many years. We tried many things to make it work. I agonized over it. I thought about it. I worried about it before I took that step. And I'd love to know from you. Feel free to send me a private message. Where are you up to? Are you still agonizing over this decision? Have you made the decision and you haven't taken any steps yet? Or are you already in the process? It's always really good for me to know where you are, because then I can make sure that I'm talking to you, the problems that you'll be having, that you are already in. So thank you already for coming into the chat box and letting me know where you're up to. And I'll share a bit of this shortly. My mental health was really affected by this decision to get divorced and even going through the process. And some of you will know how this feels because you've made decisions, you're already in this process. It feels like such a shock, doesn't it, when you make that decision? And even though I'd thought about it for so long, I was still shocked that this was happening. My life was going to be upside down. The future that I'd planned, the dreams that I had for myself, for my children, for my ex-husband, had all been taken away. And I felt like I just didn't have a future. I felt like I didn't know where I was going. I had no plan. I didn't know even how the divorce would go. And I worried about lots of different things. And some of you will also understand these fears that I had. I was really worried about how I would make ends meet. I was worried about how the children will be affected. And it was one of the most difficult times of my life. I had legal knowledge and I had experience of helping others, which makes me fortunate when I was going through my divorce. But even then, I found it so tough going through this. So I wondered how all of you that don't have legal knowledge, that haven't helped so many hundreds of people going through it, how must you be feeling now that you are going through it? So this was a thought that I had, but I've got legal knowledge and I'm so broken. how is everybody else dealing with this? How are all my clients feeling? And that's why I really changed how I work. I now help people in a really holistic way. I offer a fixed fee so that you're not worried about spiraling legal costs. I really want to bring different people into my clients' lives so they have a whole experience. I am able to talk to you about everything, help you with all the questions you have, whether it is emotional, legal, practical, financial, and really help you have that vision for your life going forward. And so I feel like I help my clients in a very different way now. And obviously, I'll talk to you about that as well. But in the meantime, over these 4 days, if you want to find out more about how I work, do feel free to reach out to me. And I'm happy to go through that with you. You'll see some photographs of me and the children here. And some of these photos, the ones at the top, are actually during the time that I was getting divorced. The girls are really young, and it was really tough bringing them up on my own. We got through, of course, it's a period of time, but it was really tough. And maybe you can see, the struggles that in my eyes that, I was going through such a tough time, and the children were as well. The photograph on the left at the top is my middle daughter, Maya, who was 6 at the time that I realized this was happening to me. And, after I told the children that we were going through a divorce. And, it was being 6, she didn't really understand. Her view was, as long as I see dad and as long as I see mum, I'll be okay. But then she struggled a lot later when the realization hit. The photograph on the right at the top is my eldest daughter, and she was still in primary school. And she was doing well. She was winning trophies and educationally doing well, but her mental health really plummeted during my divorce. And then the photographs at the bottom are, different days with the girls. Obviously, they're much older now. The one on the left, my daughter Shreya, she graduated in the summer, and we were so lucky to be there, all 3 of us with her. And actually, her dad was with us as well. And we were able to share a space together so that we could celebrate her day and, the hard work that she'd done. There's a photograph of the 3 girls and myself together. And we're really lucky. We share lots of experiences. We've been through a lot, but we've come out of it really well. The girls have grown up. And, I now am in a really different space. At that time, I was struggling to work full time while I was bringing up the children. And it was a financial struggle to start with. But as the years go on, things settle down. Me and my ex-husband are able to speak, and we're able to co-parent, although I've spent most of the time with the girls. He has every other weekend, which is what he prefers to have. The girls are now 22, 19, and 14. One is now working full time, the other is in university, and my youngest 14 is still at high school. I've got 2 different businesses now, so my life is really different. And I'm about to buy a 3rd business as well. So I'm really lucky that I'm able to have different streams of income, and my life is really settled. And thank you so much for sharing information about where you guys are up to as well. And feel free to let me know where you're up to in the chat box. I really like to know what's happening for you so that, it's really nice to share, but also so that I can make sure these sessions help you the most. So let me have a look at what you've been saying about where you're up to as well. So I've got a direct message. I filed for divorce last week, so it's really early days for you. But it's a good start. You've taken some action, you've moved things along. So, congratulations on taking that step. I've told my wife and moved out to a bedsit 3 weeks ago, she was very much, if you want to go, then just go, no discussion. Maybe there was hurt there. Maybe she was also in that place where she was ready for this to move forward. Sometimes it takes us so long to actually take that step, and both of you are at a place where you are ready. I'm now on financial settlement. That's a direct message. So you've moved forward quite a bit. Another direct message, mine is absolutely over. It has been such a long time. He is here because he has nowhere to go. However, he has apparently come into some money and will give me clarity. So again, I'm living not knowing what will happen. It's awful. So your marriage is over, and it has been for so long. And I was in that place. Yeah, and sometimes money arrives, doesn't it? Funnily enough, when the marriage is over. But actually getting clarity on your finances is going to be really important for you. So tomorrow's session, I'll be talking about financial clarity and asset settlement. So that's going to be a really good session for you. I have made the decision to divorce and filed the application earlier this month. I have a 3-year-old, so really relate to everything you are saying. You've made the decision, which is tough, and you've already taken that step to file the application. So well done on taking that step. When you've got young children, it is really tough, isn't it? You know, managing everything yourself. I am in divorce proceedings, but feeling trapped in a cohabitation cycle and financial control. I've done the counseling side, but I've married a narcissist, so don't want to do a financial agreement until I'm not living in the same house. Yeah, I really understand that, because it is tough when you are getting divorced and you're living in the same house. Many people are forced to, just because there's no other way of managing finances when you're living separately. But if it is possible, then sometimes it is a good step to take, even though lawyers will tell you not to do it. Your mental health is really important as well, and your safety. So be really careful. I've been separated since December after an incident of domestic violence. We have a 3-year-old toddler who has complained in nursery that his dad is scary and locks him up. Social services are involved. Yeah, that will happen. But don't be scared of social services. As long as you are behaving correctly and safeguarding your child, they will be supportive of you. I got married in 2017 and knew within weeks that this marriage was based on lies, but been slogging it till now. I've finally gathered the courage, but wondering where would be the best place to file for divorce, India or UK. Really interesting question. And if you now live in the UK, then you can file here. But I'll talk about that a little bit more. Completely lost and frightened, fearful of losing my daughter, worried about getting back to work. So I can afford to support my daughter and myself. And I was actually in that place when I first made the decision. I wasn't working, so I was so scared of how I would support the children. And having 3 children, it was even more worrying. And my mental health was in a really bad place. So I struggled with that. I got back to work. I started working full time because I knew I'd need to get a mortgage. But I struggled with that because the children were sick, or there was inset day or holidays, and I was covering all that time. So I really struggled with working full time. But I managed to set up my own business and found a way to work that worked for me and the children. So I was there for them, and I was able to manage when they were sick. I found a way, and you will find a way too. Don't worry, there is lots of ways that you can move forward with that. And again, losing your daughter is a real worry. And I remember feeling a similar way because I had never spent time away from the children. So actually, even spending one night away, I was so worried. I'll be talking about children as well during these 4 days, so come along to that session. 29 years married, but starting having thoughts about 10, 12 years into the marriage. Divorce process has started. I'm in the 20-week period. Hi, I'm in the process of separating, instigating divorce proceedings after 32 years, 24 married, and our children are 20 and nearly 18. It's isolating and lonely, and we are cohabiting. I've been cut off from communication. It's feeling tough and scary finding a way through this, as he is adamant he is staying in the family home, even though I'm not working and trying to build my business. Yeah, that is a worry. My 11-year-old has just had a round of counseling because of the mental stress. Really important you recognize that already and started counseling. It's important that we do get help for our mental health. And that is something that everyone needs to take away, that it's okay to get help. I got asked this question actually by a potential new client. What shall I do about my mental health? Will that affect my children and me spending time with the children? And if you are struggling with your mental health, do seek help, whether it is your GP, whether it is counseling services, private or suggested by the GP. But also your children getting help is really important as well. I did make sure that my children had play therapy at school, which was subsidized by the school, but also the GP sent them for counseling too. I'll be starting divorce and financial settlement soon. Only issue is my soon-to-be ex-husband and I don't have a single penny on joint names, and his assets are primarily in India, which can be a worry. Great to hear your journey. I've made my decision but taken no steps. Thank you for sharing that. And hopefully these 4 days will help you with those steps. I'm really worried about the impact on my daughters, 10 and 13. Despite trying hard, they can see the impact on my mental health. And something I can share around that is what I found was that obviously they were quite young when I started my journey on divorce. And not that I suggest this journey to everybody. Obviously, you've got to try and save your marriage if it's possible. That's the first step. But when you get to the realization that it's not possible to save it and you take that decision, then obviously you are going to worry about the impact. I worried about the impact, and I shared a post. Maybe you saw that my thought was that the divorce would ruin the children's lives. And yes, they were impacted. Yes, they did need counseling and support, and not just immediately, but actually even a few years after. But what I found was that they did that counseling did help, and they did move forward. And actually, they are not doing what I thought they would do, and I was worried about, was that their mental health issues would mean that they would drop out of education, that they wouldn't contribute to society, that they may be drug addicts, alcohol addicts, or just don't want to work. And I haven't found that at all. My worry was always as well that if I stayed in a toxic marriage, would that then lead them to have mental health issues, to see a negative impact? So people that stay in marriages also have children that go down these steps. It's not the divorce necessarily that will impact them. It could be how you both deal with it. So if there is negativity between you, if there is hostility, if it is still toxic, that can affect them, but also how you both support them going forward as well. So my mental health was in a very bad way. And somebody said to me, it's okay to be vulnerable with your children, obviously depending on age. And I learned that, and I was starting to become vulnerable with them. And what I saw was that then they would talk to me as well. As I shared a little bit about I'm struggling, they would share with me their difficulties and where they were struggling. So we were able to talk. Another direct message, it's my 6-year anniversary today, but my marriage, from your point of view, is over. Somebody else, I'm about to tell him, but rubber stamping, it really hurts. Yeah, it really does when you take that first step, and I really get that. But sometimes that first step is also relief that you have moved forward. Separation in mind as marriage is over, but kids involved and finance element. And I don't know where to start. And hopefully these 4 days will tell you and give you some steps on where to start. I'm ready to get out, but haven't filed. I have left my husband's house 2 years ago in August. My daughter is 20 years old and she has moved in with me. My son is 16 and he stays with both of us. He does not talk. I'm in the process of filing the application in the coming weeks. And thank you for sharing. And hopefully this will help. No children or house together, thankfully. Okay. I just received the papers from a barrister last week. Yes, he went straight to a barrister. No mediation, no solicitor. I'm not sure. He wants to do a joint application. I'm not sure. I'll be talking about that today. He's when I should be the one divorcing him for aggression and coerciveness that I have to put up with. He is the one wanting to divorce, but I don't want to do this joint. I'll share a bit about whether to go joint or sole application today. We've got a 9-year-old girl. We haven't told her, and I find this really difficult as he is the one to blame for this. But I've been told not to say this to my daughter and say we have decided. And actually, she might be a bit young to understand blame. When we start saying something about the other person, when she may have a really close relationship with her dad, it's really hard for them to see when you blame one person. I also did that. We talked together to the children and we just said we don't love each other anymore. We've decided to get divorced. And actually later on, when they're older, you can tell them in an age-appropriate way. 9 might be a bit young. She's not going to understand why it's broken down. And slowly my children realized the why it broke down, because they were becoming old enough to see for themselves what was wrong and what happened. I didn't need to tell them. They came to me and said, I don't know how you stayed for so long. But I also have to recognize that I did play a part in the breakdown of the marriage. It wasn't just him that did things. Obviously, there's 2 of us, and both of us played a part, bigger or smaller. And obviously, I'm not here to blame my ex-husband either. But we both played a part. And, some of it was down to him. And he still apologizes now for the things that he did wrong. But I didn't think it was right to tell the children, and I didn't want them to be affected by that. I've been married for 30 years. Children are 23 and 20. I'm contemplating taking the steps. Unfortunately, he has been unfaithful. I've been waiting for my children to become young adults. He sees other women for a week every month, been fearful, and judgment. Judgment is such a problem because we feel judged by society and extended family. And I was worried about this, especially from the community that I come from. That from my point of view, I felt there was a stigma, judgment, and shame. But actually, there was initially. But people move on, and I'm so much happier, and I had to think about myself. So there's a few more questions there. Thank you for sharing your story. I filed for divorce a couple of years ago. It broke my heart. I have a 5-year-old. My husband and I split just after my daughter turned 1. So thankfully, she knows no different. I'm stuck with the finances. I live in the family home, and I know that we need to divide assets. Okay. So we'll be talking about that. So lots of people sharing. Thank you so much. I've been suffering from domestic violence in my marriage. I have 2 children, and that's what I'm struggling with. My son doesn't want to leave his dad, and I feel I have to stay for him as I can't leave him alone. My family home belongs to my husband. Okay, and I'll talk about a little bit about that about when I talk about finances. So thank you for sharing, and I will, take this information, and it's really good for me to know what you guys are struggling with. My kids are over 20 but struggling to get out as he is not accepting as we live separate lives in the same house. Okay, I discovered my husband was having an affair in May. We were together 25 years. I confronted him and he left. I filed for divorce. I'm worried about my children's mental health. My 18-year-old would start counseling, but my 15-year-old won't see or speak to his father. I'm constantly in fear and worry about our futures. I want to stay in the house, but I don't know how to negotiate this. Okay, my husband does not want to divorce. We have 2 boys, 9 and 15, afraid of finances, can't find the courage. Found out my wife of 23 years was cheating on me, had multiple affairs, totally devastated me, and it does, doesn't it? It has affected me in a massive way. we've agreed to divorce now, but it's tough. How long does divorce and financial settlement take? Worst case scenario. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about timescales. So let me move forward. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate that. With sharing, it means I understand where you are up to, but it also means that when you share, you can start taking steps and moving that forward as well. So why am I doing this? You know, I'm taking out a lot of time. We've spent a lot of time preparing, putting things out there so that we can bring so much information to you. Why am I even doing this? Lots of people have asked me this. And I like to share, and I actually do these talks every week. I share information, knowledge every single week. And it comes from a place of wanting to empower you and give you knowledge. Because when I was going through this, I had knowledge. You know, all those years ago when I went through it, I had knowledge and I was scared and frightened and emotional. My mental health suffered. And I worry about everybody else that doesn't have the knowledge. And so, because I do have it, I am able to share. So, I want to bring that to you. The other thing is that this is an important week for me. It's been exactly 13 years since I made the decision to divorce this week. And so you can imagine 13 years ago, I was sat worrying about this. I was thinking about taking the step. And actually, I made the decision to take the step. And it was 13 years this week that I told my husband that it was over and we would be getting a divorce. And so it's important for me to share these milestones, to pay back to all those people that helped me during that time, during these milestones as well. So it's an important week for me. I like to think about these days, and I like to give back a bit more during these important milestones for me. And because I had to think about what to do first and struggle with that, even though I had knowledge, I want to bring those first steps to you during this week because it's an important week for me. So I'm going to get going with the information I want to share because we're already a little bit in, and I know that we haven't even gone through the actual knowledge and information I want to give you. So I'm sharing today a little bit about the actual legal process. For those of you that have told me that you are about to start or you filed your divorce application already, this is going to help you because we're talking about how it works and the timelines that you need to think about. The legal process is based on no fault divorce, which some of you will know about already. You may have read about it, but I know there's already some confusion because people will say to me, shall I do the no fault divorce or shall I do the blame divorce? And just so you know that you cannot blame the other person anymore as part of divorce proceedings. It's not possible to do that anymore. The law changed in April 2022. And before that, you could blame the other person. You could say the other person behaved unreasonable, they had done certain things, they'd committed adultery. All of these things could be done. Now we can't do that anymore. There is only one ground for divorce, and that is that your marriage has broken down. The court doesn't want to know who did what. They don't want to know who's to blame. And I personally think that it's a good change because all those years ago when we blamed the other person, it's really difficult because we're starting you off on the wrong foot. I definitely want to keep things amicable and less hostile for my clients. It's better for them, less stressful. And so I'm glad that this change has come about. We don't have to give any evidence or justification that the marriage has broken down. You are simply saying, yes, the marriage has broken down, and you can move forward. The other grounds that you do need is that you need to live mostly in the UK. So your life has to be based in the UK. So if you got married abroad, that's still okay. As long as your life is still based in the UK, you can get divorced in the UK, in England and Wales. And somebody asked, should I get divorced in England or Wales? Or should I get divorced in India where we got married? And obviously, it depends on the laws in India. And obviously, I'm not an expert in Indian law. I'm an expert in the law in the UK, in England and Wales around divorce. So what I would say is that you need to think about what divorce is like in India and what divorce is like in the UK. In the UK, we have this situation where there's no fault divorce. You don't need to give blame. And then there's this whole area around finances that need to be resolved. And I'll talk a little bit about that today. So you need to think about, would you get a better settlement in the UK or would you get a better settlement in India? And you may need to speak to an Indian lawyer about that. I'll talk a bit about financial settlement tomorrow. So you'll get an idea tomorrow about how that works in the UK. And then the other question is, how does the arrangements for children work in the UK against India? Again, I don't know about Indian law, but in the UK, we are looking at both parents being are needed for children. And it's important that children have a good quality relationship with both parents. So think about those things when you decide where to file. You don't need to give reasons why, how, and when it started to break down. Nothing, just that your marriage has broken down. The court doesn't need any information or any detail around that. You can make an application on paper. So you can fill in a paper form called a D8 form. You can download that from the government website. Or you can make your application online. Online is much simpler and quicker. And it saves paper and everything else, and you don't have to go and post it. So you can submit it all online and prepare it online. It's much easier now to submit it themselves, like for people to submit it themselves. So, this is something the government has done to make online divorce much simpler for you. So that's how now no-fault divorce works. How do you actually go around doing this? So assuming that you're doing this online because that's simpler, you can make a sole application or single application or a joint application. And I know one of you mentioned that you were thinking about which one to go for. So hopefully this will help. You would need a copy of your marriage certificate to be able to go ahead with a divorce application. You need a digital copy, so a photograph or a scanned copy, because if you're doing it online, you would just be uploading a file. So you don't necessarily need the original. How do you decide which of these is right for you, a sole or single application or a joint application? So let me take you through the different ways of doing this and which one might be right for you. So if you're amicable and you're communicating well and things are good between you, even though you're moving forward with a divorce application, you might want to go ahead with a joint application because you can communicate and because you're amicable, and you might want to start things off that way so that you're both in control, so that you're both taking steps to move this divorce forward, but in a less hostile way, in a more amicable and collaborative way. So if that's you, then a joint application could work. And I'll tell you how you make a joint application as well. One of you would prepare the application and submit it. The other person would then receive the application to review and say that they're happy with it and then press go. And that issues it to the court. The court would receive it, check it, and let you know that everything is correct. And if it is all fine, it's then issued, which means it's given a case number, and you get an email saying your application is issued. But for those of you that aren't quite like that, is it right for you? Would you go for a joint application or a sole application? So if you don't want to communicate with your ex, if they won't talk to you, if you feel like if you ask them for a joint application, they'll make it hard. You'll do the first bit, but they'll never finish the second bit. Then it's better to do a sole or single application. so that you can keep an element of control. Because if you do a joint application, you do your bit and they don't do their bit, you are stuck. It can't move forward. And then you'd need to pull that application and start again. So if there's a question mark around this, just do a sole application. If you just cannot talk to each other, so you don't know what they'll do, whether they'll fill in their bit, then do a sole application. If you've got an injunction against the other person, if there has been coercive behavior, controlling behavior, which is what I think one of you said you had, then do a sole application because you don't want to be beholden to that person. If you think there's going to be disputes, so you're not going to agree the finances, this is going to be a really hard process. Again, go for a sole application. You might just want control over the process because you don't want the other person to have control. Then a joint application is not for you, and I would go for a single or sole application. How do you make this single or sole application? So to do this, you need to prepare the application and you need to submit it to the court, assuming you do it online. You would need to pay the fee, and this is then checked by the court. If everything is correct, they would then issue it. And the application is sent to the other person by post and email. And they need to confirm that they've received it. So this is how a sole application works. If you've made a sole application, lots of people will say to me, can my ex stop me from going forward? And there isn't many grounds that that person can stop you from going forward because there's very limited grounds to defend a sole application. The only obstacle might be if that person doesn't sign the form to say they've received the application. So that's the only way they can make it difficult for you. They can make it difficult, but they can't stop you. They can put an obstacle in the way, but there are ways around that, which I won't cover now just because of time, but there are ways around it. Court fees. So when you are looking at a divorce application, you'll have court fees to pay. And the court fee currently is £593. It can change, and this needs to be paid when you submit the application. So it doesn't matter if it's a sole application or a joint application, the fee is still the same. So you would need to submit this unless you are on low income or on benefits, and you may then get help with fees. Obviously, you may have legal fees if you decide to get help with your divorce application, finances, and the situation around children. You don't necessarily need to get a solicitor to do any of this for you, whether it is your divorce application or anything through the rest of the legal process either. You can do it all yourself, which people don't realize. It is possible to do it yourself. A solicitor would charge you around £1,200 plus VAT just to do the divorce application. Then there would be further charges for the remainder of the process. They charge, on average, the legal fees for an individual, so for one of you, in the UK is £18,000 each. That's an average. Sometimes it could be, say, 8,000 approximately, or it could be 50,000 or 70,000 even. So it ranges depending on how difficult it is, depending on the amount of assets, depending on how difficult the other person makes it and whether you need to go to court. So if you think the average is 18,000 per person, but it is possible for you to do everything yourself without paying huge fees like that. So I just wanted to let you know that you don't necessarily need a solicitor. Some people want a solicitor, which is fine. Some people will do it all themselves without support. Some people would come to somebody like me that supports you to do it yourself. And so I can give you a low fixed fee and support you throughout. The next thing I'm going to go through is the timeline for a no-fault divorce, which is the only way to get divorced. And the timeline is difficult for people to understand. So we've got an image here to help you. This is a timeline for a sole application. With a joint application, it can be a little bit different because both of you are instantly submitting that you are going forward with the divorce. So this is almost for a sole application, and I'll talk you through it. Step one, you can see one person starts the divorce. So if you're making a sole application, you would be starting the divorce. You would fill in the form, you would submit it with your fee, and then step two would be the court. Well, actually, the court would check the application, and if everything is fine, approximately 2 weeks later, the court will issue the application to the other person, which is step two there. Once it's been issued to the other person, there is I know that you've raised your hand. Would you be able to put the question into the chat box? And I don't know if that raising of hands was a mistake, but put your question in the chat box and I will drop this to you. I will answer the question later. But once the court has issued the application at stage two, you then have a 20-week reflection period. And I know somebody said that they're actually in this 20-week reflection period already. So you have this big gap that you have to wait, and this is new. We never had this before, but now the court wants you to wait 20 weeks before you can move on to step three, which is applying for your conditional order. Once you apply for your conditional order, the court reviews your application, and at step five, they will grant you the conditional order. There can be a gap between step four and step five, and it can be about 3 weeks, depends on the backlog that the court has. Then you get your conditional order, but what conditional order means is that you have met all the conditions to get divorced. So you've submitted an application, you've said that your marriage has broken down, you've got a marriage certificate, you can get divorced in England and Wales because your life is mainly based here, and you have waited the 20-week cooling off period as well. And you also have another step, which is that your ex has received the application, which I've mentioned as well. And hopefully within those 20 weeks, you've managed to show the court that your ex has received the application. But it still doesn't mean once you get to conditional order that your divorce is final. This just means you've met the conditions. So you then wait, after conditional order, you wait 6 weeks before you can apply for your final order. And your final order would end your marriage. So, you know, that you have to wait those 6 weeks to apply. So at step six, you have applied for your final order. And when you apply for your final order, it's usually granted within 24 hours. So there's a minimum time frame now of 30 weeks approximately for you to go from start to finish. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the time scales if you are just applying for a divorce. If you have got finances to resolve, the timescale will be longer. And I'll talk about that a little bit about when we come to finances. But when you get to stage 7, your marriage is over, and obviously you then have your final order, which is a legal document. You've got your marriage certificate, and then you've got your final order, which proves that your marriage has come to an end. So that is the timeline. And I can see lots of questions coming in, and I'll come to them shortly. I'm going to take you through the situation around finances and the divorce process now, just so that you can see how that works. The situation around finances hasn't changed through the no-fault divorce process. It's still the same as it always was. If you've got assets such as property and savings, investments, pensions, any debts in your sole name, or your ex-partner's sole name, or in your joint names, then you need to reach an agreement about your finances. Your first step is to declare to each other what you have in your name and joint names with the value of each asset and liability. This is called financial disclosure. Once you've got this, you've got a picture of what assets and liabilities you have, then we start thinking about how you can share it. And I'll talk a bit about this tomorrow. If you can get to an agreement yourselves with the help of family and friends, or by chatting it through together, or with the help of a mediator, then this agreement can be put into a document that is filed at court. The document is called a financial order by consent, a consent order, clean break order. It's all the same thing. It's just different names for the same documents. And this can only be sent to the court when you have got to conditional order. So going back to the timeline, once you get your conditional order at step 5, only then can you file this financial agreement to the court. That's the earliest you can file it, not the latest, but the earliest the court will look at your financial agreement is after step 5. So approximately it will be 2 weeks to issue and then the 20 weeks to the reflection period. So 22 weeks is the earliest from the date of issue. It's not the latest, it's the earliest. So just bear that in mind. So the court then turns this consent order that you have filed into an order if they are happy with what's written in the order, if it is fair. And obviously I'll talk about fairness tomorrow. You cannot change your mind once you've got this consent order in place. It's a legally binding agreement and you can't claim on each other again. And it is best to get this order done. It's advisable so that you never have this question about whether the agreement that you came to is still valid. Nobody can change their minds. It's best to get to an agreement if you can, because it's quicker and easier and less stressful, less expensive as well. This is where your legal costs really go up if you cannot get to an agreement. So getting this agreement, getting a consent order protects both of you and is cheaper, less stressful, and much better for you. But if you can't get to an agreement, you might need to make an application to the court for the judge to help you with your finances. It might be because the other person doesn't agree to a reasonable proposal. It might be that you have to take this step because they're not willing to disclose assets. There might be hiding assets or moving them around, selling things, moving them into their mum's name or their brother's name, etc. So if you're in this position, you might need to go to court to settle your finances, and you might need to go to court very quickly. If you do this, then a judge can make a decision on your finances. So they will have a look at what there is, they'll look at what is needed, and then they will make a final decision, and you are bound by that. It's very expensive to go through a court-ordered financial settlement. You don't necessarily need a lawyer again. Lots of people are doing it themselves to save money, but you might want someone to attend court with you. So again, it can be quite costly. There's a lot to prepare as well, and that's why I would say it's better not to go down that route if you can help it. The final element of this legal process is children. If you've got children, then obviously it's going to be a worry about what happens to them. And when it comes to children, the court doesn't ask for any information about what you plan to do, about where the children live, what arrangements are in place. They will leave it to you both to make the best decision for your children, and you don't need to communicate what that is to the court. They'll assume that you've made a decision and you've come to an agreement, unless you let them know otherwise. Both of you as parents have got the same rights and responsibilities for the children. This is something called parental responsibility. The courts expect you as parents to find an arrangement that is in the best interest of the children, not necessarily yourselves, but in the best interest of the children. If you can reach agreement about what to do, where they live, how much contact the other person has, whether you do a shared agreement, so both of you are having a good amount of time with the children, where the children go to school, religion, education, all of these things, whether the other person can take them on holiday, all of these things need to be agreed by you, and it's best to do it that way if possible. If you do get to an agreement, put it in writing so that you've got a basis for what was agreed and it's quite clear. And again, you don't need to get a lawyer to prepare this document, which we call a parenting plan, for you. You can prepare that yourself. If you can't reach an agreement, then the court is there to help you make decisions. They will make that decision for you. And again, you are bound by that decision, but it can be expensive and stressful to go through that. As I said, if you go to court, you don't necessarily need a solicitor doing everything for you, but you might decide you want someone to attend the hearing with you, and so obviously your costs can go up. I believe in keeping your legal costs as low as possible. I really want people to stop spending 50, 70, 80,000 pounds on legal fees and really be empowered and try and manage this themselves as much as possible. And maybe that's why I put on these talks so much, because I want you to understand some information around how this works. The last thing that I will talk about is your priorities and vision. I always think it's a good idea to do this exercise, because when you do this, you really need to think about where you are going. It can help you stay on track. It can make sure you know what your ultimate destination is and how it needs to be along the way. It can help you communicate differently because, for example, if your aim is that you have a good co-parenting relationship, then you need to communicate differently with your ex-partner to try and keep things amicable for the sake of the children. You need to make sure that things are said in a certain way so that you can keep to that priority. And obviously, I'm not saying allow your boundaries to be crossed, but we bear that in mind. When things get really difficult, remind yourself of your vision, of where you're going, of what your life is going to look like on the other side. And so these things are really important. So for me, when I was going through this, my priorities were having a good, effective co-parenting relationship. I really wanted that. It doesn't mean you're sharing the time equally, but I wanted to be able to pick up the phone to my ex-husband and have a chat about something, or have flexibility around swapping weekends, manage things us together, but even like going to school plays, parents' evening, graduations together. And so that was important to me for the sake of the children. I wanted to keep the family home. That was important to me. And I tried everything to do that. Ultimately, I didn't manage it, but I realized my priorities changed. I would have probably needed to do 3 jobs while bringing up 3 very young children to be able to keep it, because the mortgage is so high. And I realized that doing that was not my priority. Actually, my priority was a stable home, which I owned for me and the girls, so that we could spend time together and I could get back on my feet slowly. And so I did sell the family home and bought something much smaller, much more manageable. So my priority changed, but I started off with that. I wanted to find a way to make sure the books balanced, because every month I was worried about making ends meet while bringing up the girls. So that was a priority. And I think number 2 and 3 actually didn't fit well together initially, but I changed my priority. And your priorities might be different. What could yours be? You might want to move closer to your family and friends. You might want to share time 50-50 with the children. What exactly is important to you? And in your workbook for day 1, you will see that as a task. It's really important to do this, even though it doesn't feel legal, but it will help your legal advisor. It helps me when my clients do this so that I understand their priorities. Think about it carefully, what is important to you, and put down 3 priorities at least in order of importance. It will help you make a plan, it will help you communicate, and you can stay on track as well. What is negotiable for you and what is non-negotiable? What will you refuse to negotiate on? For some people would say that what is non-negotiable is having their children live with them. And I guess that was a non-negotiable for me because I did all the childcare. My ex-husband had a very busy, stressful job. My little one was 1 year old, and he'd not had them for an extended period of time. So he'd never had them more than 2 hours. So to start off with, the children lived with me, and we could have changed this a bit further into the future when he got used to having the children. But that was my non-negotiable to start with. Knowing what is negotiable for you and what is non-negotiable, it's really good to think about and put down, because again, that really helps you going forward. know where your plan is. And knowing your vision, have you sat down and thought about the vision for the future that you have when this is all done? I anchored into this vision regularly when I was going through my divorce. I thought about it. I could feel it. I could see it. I could, feel the emotions that I would have at the end of this. So when I had really difficult days, I closed my eyes and remembered why I was doing this. And what I saw was a space that was mine that brought me joy and peace. That's all I wanted, was to have peace and joy. And the children weren't so affected, and our mental health had improved. And we just were living our best life. And I could feel this. Keep that vision really strong in your mind, because it will help you go through. Think about what your vision is and make that plan. Put it into your workbook and share it with me. Share it with me by email. Share it with me in the hub. If you've seen that, jump onto the hub. Share your vision with me. And I'd love to see that, because it makes such a difference. Okay, so that is your day one task. If you want to take some small steps forward, reflect on your goals and your priorities. Think about your vision. Make a plan for how you're going to get there. And think about your milestones. How do you want all this to happen? Do you want the divorce to be finished first and then start on the finances? Some people want to start talking finances first and then start their divorce application. How do you need it to be? Think about this before you've even taken any other steps. So you'll see these tasks in your workbook. Day 2, as I've mentioned, I'm going to be talking about financial clarity and asset division. And it is a lot of information that I need to share with you. So come along live so you can answer I can answer your questions. Now, Mark, can you put the workbook back into the chat box so everybody can see that? Right, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to look at what you guys have been saying. Okay, so let me go back. And I know we've gone over a little bit today, but a lot of you were sharing with me and I didn't want to miss that. So I hope that's still okay. And if you need to jump off, hopefully you can see the replay. So let me go back to your questions. There's quite a lot in the chat box, lots of direct messages, which is great. So let me go back to the first one. Hopefully you found that helpful so far. Do let me know. Is that helpful? Was there things there that you could take away? While I am looking for the first message, first question. Loads of things in the chat box. How long does divorce and financial settlement take? Worst case scenarios. So we talked a little bit about timelines. So the timeline for your divorce is the 26 weeks from issuing the application to final order. If you've got finances to resolve, you need to reach an agreement. And say, for example, you kept everything on track and you managed to agree your finances within that 20-week cooling off period, for example, and you submit your consent order to the court after you've got conditional order, then what happens? The court takes about 2 months to come back with that consent order stamped. So it can take 2 months approximately. And then the ideal situation is that you apply for final order once you have got your consent order stamped by the court. So if you think about that, then you've got the 26 weeks, 20 weeks, 2 months, so that's 8 weeks, 28 weeks, and then you apply for final order. So it can take you about 30 weeks plus to get this done from start to finish, if you manage to get it kept into those timelines. Most people need a little bit longer than that. And these are the minimum timelines. So once you've applied for conditional order, if you've still not agreed your finances, don't worry. You don't have to apply for send the consent order straight away. You can wait and send it a few months later. So this is the earliest, not the latest. So don't worry if you don't hit those timescales. Okay, so let's have a look. What else is there? Do we have to give reasons for the divorce? No, you don't. I covered that. I got married abroad. In our country, when you marry, you have to choose if you want to join finances or keep them separate. We agreed to keep them separate, but unsure this will be taken into account in the UK courts. If you have done that in a different country, if you've got divorced in a different country, it will be that country's law that applies. You're not getting divorced in the UK, so it wouldn't apply. Got a direct message. I've got a 13-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. We've been married for 21 years. Okay, I'm mentally broken and lonely. I don't know if I will manage financially. So I'll talk a bit about managing financially tomorrow. I'll talk a bit about income and expenditure tomorrow and what you can do. I'm so scared to do anything. I've got no support. My parents said I should just put up with it and pray to God. I have to go, but I want to listen to the replay. You'll get the replay link today, and definitely join tomorrow as well. I suspect my partner will be extremely difficult about money and he is narcissistic. Do you think having a solicitor is a better option? There is definitely times where having a solicitor is an option, and that could be an option for everybody. You might all think you want to have a solicitor helping you, and that is absolutely fine. It's one option. Lots of people do it themselves, and that is definitely an option. Somebody like me that supports you to do it yourself is an option. But in your situation, where, for example, you think he may be difficult, a solicitor may just send you to a mediator. They may not do anything more if this is a difficult situation. So you may instruct somebody and they may write one letter and then say, go to mediation. You could write one email to your ex and ask if there's a possibility of resolving things and getting to agreement. If not, you could go directly to a mediator. You don't need a solicitor to do that for you. So a mediation can still be an option if you're dealing with a narcissistic ex. And actually, looking at the definition of narcissism is a separate session that I do, so I won't talk about that. But mediation can help you get to an agreement. But if you think that actually with a narcissist, sometimes getting to an agreement is not even possible because that's the kind of person they are, you might just want to go straight to court. So going to mediation and then going to court very quickly might be an option for you. But it really depends on your situation, what the best step is for you. Direct message here. I've applied for the divorce and the conditional order is listed as the 19th of November. Do I have to apply for the conditional order on or after that date? As that's what I've been told. You don't have to apply for your conditional order on the date that the court has told you. That's the earliest that you can apply. So say, for example, you don't want to apply for conditional order that date. You can wait. You can leave it till December or even January to apply. You could leave it till February to apply for your conditional order. Some people like to apply for it and then wait to agree their finances. And what's the risk on doing that? Because there can be a problem when you do it like that. If you apply for conditional order, you can apply for final order in 6 weeks, but if there's finances, you should wait to apply for final order. But can the other person apply for final order? And yes, they can after 3 months of conditional order. If you apply for final order and you are now divorced, again, what's the risk? You could sort out your finances later. If that person passes away and you are no longer married, you're not next of kin anymore. And the consequences of that, you not being next of kin like that, is that if the person passes away, their assets will go in their will. So it's better to stay married to that person until you have got that financial order. So if you think there is a risk that the other person will apply for final order, just wait out on your conditional order. You don't need to apply for it straight away. My conditional order is granted, but I have not pushed final button as need the financial agreement. And it warns you not to divorce before the agreement, otherwise you lose rights. Yes, so I've just explained the rights that you could lose. It's generally a better idea to do it that way. Are you officially divorced if no financial settlement done? Once you have got your final order, you are officially divorced, even if you haven't sorted out finances. I don't think we're officially divorced until final. Yes, that's right. What if the other person does not disclose as the assets are not in the UK? Are the inherited assets count or assets created before marriage? Really interesting question, and I'll talk about inheritance first. Usually, if you have got an inheritance coming in the future, usually that is not part of your divorce. And I hear it all the time. Somebody will say to me, but she is going to get £5 million from her dad when he passes away. So why do I have to share the assets we've got? That isn't relevant. So future inheritance is not relevant generally. There are exceptions to that, but I won't go through that. If you have received inheritance and you've kept it separate in a separate account, you've never mixed it with family money, there may be an argument to say that it should be kept separate. But these things are grey areas, so we would need to know the exact details. Okay. My wife is a US citizen and lives here as my dependent. Will she be deported after divorce? What if she took children and moved to US? So we need to look at your immigration status. Obviously, I'm not an immigration lawyer, so I'm not going to go into detail about immigration. It depends on what your visa is and how she is here. What if she took the children and moved to the US? If you're worried about that, you can get an order that stops her from doing that. It's called a prohibited steps order, and I'll talk about that on day 3. So on Wednesday. Thank you, Hithel, for saying this is the information's been useful. Okay, I've got no family here. What my husband has. His family have never been close. Our daughter has never been treated the same as other grandkids. Worried about him leaning on them, which may not be potentially the best for her. It's important that children obviously see both parents. Both parents are able to give good quality parenting to children. Years ago, the courts had a bias towards women. That isn't the case anymore. They recognize that dads and mums can bring quality time to children, and dads and mums are both needed to children. If you are worried about parental alienation, that is slightly different. And obviously, we don't want parents manipulating children, but it depends on the level of parental alienation, depends on what effect it has on your child. But both parents do need to see the children as long as there are no safeguarding issues. And obviously, I'll talk about that again on Wednesday. Okay. And somebody, Brian, you've said that you can't make tomorrow. Can you email questions? Yes. Feel free to drop me some questions. I'm glad that you found it useful, and I can see some of your feedback. Extremely helpful, makes it seem possible. It is absolutely possible for you to go through this. Okay. I'm going to take this as my last question, but I will note down all the questions so that if I can, I'll drop you some information. My ex is not filing the conditional order and delaying for 6 months. It's overdue and keeps asking for an undertaking that I will not apply for the final order. I've sent them a letter stating the same, but they want a solicitor approved undertaking. Yeah, I mean, this is often people will say that they are worried that you will apply for final order, so they won't apply for conditional order. Usually, something in writing from you is enough. If they will only accept a solicitor-approved undertaking, you may need to take that step. Is it the same time tomorrow? Yes, same time tomorrow, same Zoom details, same ID and password. So hopefully that's been helpful. And there's lots more questions, which I haven't managed to get to, but I will note them all down and I will come back to you if I can. Do come along tomorrow. I would love to see you. Tomorrow's session is quite detailed around finances, financial disclosure. What do you need to disclose? How do you get to that fair settlement, which is what lots of people ask me. So looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, and have a good rest of the day. I'm glad you found this useful. Do let me know your feedback. I am going to turn my video off and mute myself, but I will be checking your messages and your feedback. So I would love to see that. It's really helpful for me to see how you have found today and what your thoughts are. So See you tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here and enjoy your day.